What would you do if you discovered a billion-dollar secret that could save your dying sister? But stealing it would make you a target of international criminals. Stop for a moment. Really think about that question. Because tonight, you're about to meet two men who faced exactly this impossible choice, and their decision changed everything. Have you ever been forced to choose between your moral compass and saving someone you love? Maybe you've watched a family member suffer while medical bills piled up like an avalanche, knowing there was nothing you could do. Or perhaps you've seen someone close to you make a choice that seemed completely out of character when their back was against the wall. Do you know someone who's faced impossible medical bills with no way to pay? Someone who's had to choose between bankruptcy and watching a loved one die? If you've never been in that position, consider yourself fortunate. But for millions of people around the world, this nightmare is reality. Tonight, we're exploring the story of two ordinary sailors who stumbled upon the discovery of a lifetime and made a choice that would haunt them forever. Dmitri Volkov, a Ukrainian navigation officer with an impeccable reputation, and Alejandro Restrepo, a brilliant Colombian engineer running from his past. Both good men. Both desperate. Both about to cross a line they never thought they'd cross. Their story begins in the freezing waters off Alaska, where massive oil tankers carry liquid fortunes worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But what these two men found hidden aboard their ship wasn't oil. It was something far more valuable. Something worth exactly $1 billion in precious metals. Something that belonged to people who couldn't report it stolen without exposing their own crimes. Here's what makes this case so fascinating. Every expert who's studied it argues about one crucial question. Was this the perfect crime, executed by two brilliant minds who seized an once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Or was it pure luck? A series of coincidences that aligned perfectly for two desperate men who had no idea what they were really getting into? By the end of this video, you'll understand why maritime security experts still debate this question today. You'll learn exactly how they pulled off one of the most audacious heists in history. But more importantly, you'll discover the devastating price both men paid for their desperate decision, and why their story serves as a warning about what happens when good people convince themselves that wrong choices are justified. If you've ever wondered how far you'd go to save family, hit that like button and let me know in the comments, because this story will challenge everything you think you know about right and wrong. Trust me, you've never heard anything quite like what happened aboard the Northern Star. Before we get to the billion-dollar heist, you need to understand who these men really were. Because their backgrounds hold the key to understanding how two fundamentally good people ended up making such a catastrophic choice. Meet Dmitri Volkov. 34 years old, born in the port city of Odessa, Ukraine. For 15 years, Dmitri had built his reputation as one of the most reliable navigation officers in the merchant marine. His colleagues described him with words you rarely hear about anyone these days. Methodical, trustworthy, completely dependable. The kind of man who would give you his last dollar if you needed it. Dmitri had worked his way up from deckhand to senior navigation officer through pure determination and an almost obsessive attention to detail. He knew every shipping route from Alaska to Singapore like the back of his hand. His logbooks were meticulous. His safety record was spotless. In 15 years at sea, he had never once been cited for any violation, no matter how minor. But in early 2023, Dmitri's carefully ordered world collapsed. His younger sister Katya, just 28 years old, was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia. The doctors in Ukraine gave her 6 months without treatment. The experimental therapy that could save her life was available only in specialized clinics in Switzerland. The cost? $800,000. For a sailor earning $45,000 a year, this might as well have been $800 million. Ukrainian state healthcare couldn't help with experimental treatments. Private insurance wouldn't cover procedures not approved in Ukraine. Dmitri faced a simple, brutal reality. Watch his sister die, or find $800,000 somehow. Now let me introduce you to Alejandro Restrepo. Everyone called him Alex. 28 years old, born in Medellin, Colombia, during some of the worst violence the city had ever seen. Alex was brilliant. He'd earned his engineering degree through night classes while working 3 jobs to support his family. His specialty was marine engines, and he could fix problems that left other engineers baffled. But Alex wasn't at sea because he loved the ocean. He was running. His father had been a police officer who made the fatal mistake of testifying against cartel operations. The retaliation was swift and merciless. Alex's father was killed first, then his two older brothers. Alex escaped to the merchant marine, using his engineering skills to disappear into the vast network of international shipping. For 3 years, Alex thought he'd finally found safety. He sent money home to his mother every month, helping her rebuild their shattered life. He was planning to bring her to Canada, where he could eventually get citizenship and start fresh. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Alex's mother had been kidnapped by the same cartel that had killed his father and brothers. The message was simple: $200,000, or she would disappear forever. Alex had 30 days. These two men, Dmitri with his dying sister, Alex with his kidnapped mother, met aboard the MV Northern Star in January 2023. It was supposed to be a routine 6-month contract, hauling Alaskan crude oil to refineries in California. Dmitri was the senior navigation officer. Alex was the lead marine engineer. At first, their relationship was purely professional. Dmitri's navigation expertise perfectly complemented Alex's engineering brilliance. But something happens when you're stuck on a ship for months with the same people. The isolation of the open ocean strips away pretenses. Real friendships form in ways they never could on land. Late at night, during the quiet hours when most of the crew was sleeping, Dmitri and Alex found themselves talking about their families, their fears, their impossible situations. Two desperate men who had both run out of options, bonding over circumstances that seemed hopeless. Here's what this teaches us about desperation. When we're backed into a corner, even the most moral people can convince themselves that wrong choices are justified if the cause is noble enough. Dmitri and Alex weren't criminals. They were good men facing impossible choices, and that made them far more dangerous than any career criminal ever could be. 3 months into their contract, everything changed during one of the most violent storms either man had ever experienced. The Gulf of Alaska in March is unforgiving. 30-foot waves, winds howling at 70 miles per hour, and temperatures that can kill you in minutes if you fall overboard. The Northern Star, all 900 feet of her, was getting hammered. Dmitri fought to keep the massive tanker on course while Alex monitored the engine systems from below. That's when the alarms started screaming. A leak had developed in cargo hold number 3. Not a catastrophic breach, but serious enough to trigger emergency protocols. Under maritime law, any leak involving crude oil requires immediate docking at the nearest port for inspection and repairs. The closest facility was Dutch Harbor, Alaska, a small, understaffed port that handled mostly fishing vessels and the occasional emergency. As senior navigation officer, Dmitri had no choice but to alter course. But something felt wrong. The leak had appeared suddenly, with no warning signs during their routine inspections just hours earlier. The timing seemed almost too convenient, happening just as they were passing the remotest part of their route. When they reached Dutch Harbor 12 hours later, Alex volunteered to conduct the cargo hold inspection. It was his job as marine engineer, and frankly, he welcomed the distraction from thinking about his mother's situation. The ransom deadline was getting closer, and he still had no idea where he would find $200,000. Alex descended into cargo hold number 3 with his inspection equipment. The thick smell of crude oil filled his nostrils as he checked the hull integrity and examined the supposed leak. What he found made his blood run cold. The leak wasn't real. It had been artificially triggered by a sophisticated remote control system. But that wasn't the shocking part. As Alex investigated further, he discovered something that would change both their lives forever. Hidden beneath layers of crude oil and camouflaged by specially designed false compartments were dozens of sealed containers. Each container was roughly the size of a large suitcase, made from pressure-resistant materials that wouldn't show up on standard cargo scans. Alex's engineering background told him immediately that this was no accident. This was an incredibly sophisticated smuggling operation. When he pried open the first container, Alex couldn't believe what he was seeing. Refined platinum and palladium, worth millions of dollars per container. His hands shaking, he quickly counted 47 containers total. Based on current precious metal prices, he was looking at nearly $1 billion worth of cargo that wasn't supposed to exist. The Northern Star wasn't just an oil tanker. It was a smuggling vessel for an international criminal organization, using legitimate oil shipments as cover to move precious metals across the globe without detection. The fake leak had been triggered because someone, somewhere, was getting too close to the truth. Alex's mind raced as he climbed back to the main deck. He found Dmitri in the navigation room, studying weather patterns and calculating their repair timeline. The port was shrouded in thick fog, and most of the skeleton crew at Dutch Harbor had gone home for the night. "Dmitri," Alex said quietly, "we need to talk. Now." They walked to the stern of the ship, away from any crew members who might overhear. In whispered voices, Alex explained what he had discovered. Dmitri's face went pale as he realized the implications. "We're working for criminals," Dmitri said finally. "All this time, we've been helping smuggle stolen metals." "But here's the thing," Alex replied, his voice barely audible above the sound of waves against the hull. "These people can't report a theft without exposing their own operation. If someone were to take those containers—" The words hung in the air between them. Neither man spoke for several minutes. The fog swirled around the ship like a blanket, hiding them from the world. "My sister has 2 months left," Dmitri said. "Maybe less." "My mother has 3 weeks," Alex responded. They stood there in the cold Alaskan night, two good men staring at an opportunity that could solve both their problems. An opportunity that would require them to become the very thing they had always despised: thieves. "It's not really stealing," Alex said finally. "We'd be taking from criminals. People who have probably destroyed countless lives with their operations." "The money would save innocent people," Dmitri added. "My sister. Your mother. We're not doing this for ourselves." Before I tell you what they decided, I want you to pause and think, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is about to take a turn that will shock you. This moment reveals a dangerous truth about human psychology. We can rationalize almost any action when we tell ourselves the victims deserve it, or when we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. Dmitri and Alex were about to cross a line they could never uncross, and they had convinced themselves it was justified. The decision was made. Standing in that fog-covered harbor, Dmitri and Alex crossed the line from desperate men to criminals. But making the choice was the easy part. Actually pulling off a billion-dollar heist required something far more dangerous: their professional expertise. Dmitri spread out maritime charts in his quarters, his 15 years of navigation experience becoming the foundation of their plan. He knew exactly how Dutch Harbor operated: the skeleton crew schedules, the security protocols, the blind spots in their surveillance system. More importantly, he understood something crucial about human nature. Night shift workers in remote locations get complacent. "We have a 3-night window," Dmitri explained, his finger tracing the tidal charts. "The fog bank will persist for at least 72 hours based on current weather patterns. After that, visibility improves and we lose our cover." Alex's engineering mind was already solving the technical challenges. Each container weighed approximately 400 pounds and was designed to be undetectable by conventional scanning equipment. Moving 47 containers without triggering security alarms would require precise timing and creative problem-solving. "I can disable the cargo hold monitoring systems," Alex said. "I'll create false maintenance alerts that require temporary shutdowns. Standard procedure allows up to 4 hours for routine engine room maintenance." But they needed an exit strategy. Alex remembered seeing a small fishing boat moored at the far end of the harbor, the Maria's Dream, operated by a weathered fisherman who kept to himself. Through careful observation, Alex learned the boat belonged to Rosario Santos, who had emigrated from Colombia 5 years earlier. Here's where Alex made a calculated gamble. He approached Rosario with a story about needing to transport emergency medical supplies to a remote research station. Alex's Colombian accent and his knowledge of Medellin convinced Rosario he was legitimate. The pay Alex offered, $5,000 for 1 night's work, was more than Rosario typically made in 2 months. Night 1 began at 11 p.m. Dmitri had manipulated the duty rosters to ensure minimal crew presence in the cargo areas during the midnight to 4 a.m. shift. Using his authority as senior navigation officer, he assigned the 2 most reliable night watchmen to emergency hull inspections on the opposite side of the ship. Alex descended into cargo hold number 3 with equipment he'd borrowed from the ship's maintenance department. The containers were secured with industrial-grade magnetic locks, sophisticated, but not beyond his engineering capabilities. Each lock required a specific electromagnetic pulse sequence to open without triggering alarms. The first container opened with a soft click. Inside, secured in foam padding, were bars of platinum worth $23 million. Alex's hands trembled as he lifted the precious metal. This single container contained more money than he would earn in 500 years. Working methodically, Alex rigged a pulley system using ship's rigging and maintenance cables. The containers had to be moved through the cargo hold, up 3 levels, across the main deck, and lowered to the harbor where Rosario waited with Maria's dream. Each transfer took approximately 12 minutes. By 3:47 a.m., they had successfully moved 14 containers. Alex was exhausted, his clothes soaked with sweat despite the freezing temperature. Dmitri kept watch from the bridge, monitoring radio communications and tracking the movements of the skeleton crew. Night 2 brought unexpected challenges. A late-shift security guard decided to conduct an unscheduled patrol of the cargo areas. Dmitri spotted him on the surveillance monitors and radioed Alex immediately. "Company coming. You have 90 seconds." Alex quickly secured the container he was working on and hid behind a massive oil pump. The guard's flashlight beam swept across the cargo hold, missing Alex by mere inches. The man spent 5 agonizing minutes checking gauges and recording readings before moving on to the next section. "That was too close," Alex whispered when the guard finally left. "We're committed now," Dmitri replied. "No turning back." By the end of night 2, they had moved 31 containers. Rosario was growing suspicious about the medical supplies that weighed hundreds of pounds each, but Alex's generous payments kept him quiet. The fog remained thick, providing perfect cover for their operations. Night 3 was their final chance. 16 containers remained, worth approximately $400 million. Alex had perfected his technique, reducing transfer time to 8 minutes per container. Dmitri had studied the guard patterns so thoroughly he could predict their movements to the minute. But at 2:15 a.m., disaster nearly struck. One of the container's magnetic locks malfunctioned, triggering a brief alarm signal. Alex's heart stopped as warning lights flashed throughout the cargo hold. Using his engineering knowledge, he quickly rerouted the alarm through a maintenance bypass, making it appear as a routine system test. By 4:30 a.m. on March 15th, all 47 containers were aboard Maria's Dream. Nearly $1 billion in precious metals sat hidden beneath fishing nets and equipment. Alex and Dmitri had just pulled off one of the most audacious heists in maritime history. But now came the most dangerous part, disappearing without triggering an investigation. Dmitri's knowledge of maritime law provided the solution. He would file a report claiming Alex had suffered a severe injury during repairs and required immediate medical evacuation to Anchorage. Maritime regulations required a senior officer to accompany injured crew members for serious emergencies. Notice how their expertise, skills they'd spent years developing for legitimate purposes, became the very tools of their downfall. Our greatest strengths can become our greatest weaknesses when we use them for the wrong reasons. For 6 months, Dmitri Volkov and Alex Restrepo simply vanished. They disappeared into the vast network of international shipping like ghosts, their identities carefully erased and rebuilt with help from contacts they'd cultivated over years at sea. Alex used his connections in the merchant marine to secure passage on a cargo vessel bound for Southeast Asia. His engineering credentials opened doors in ports from Malaysia to the Philippines, where he began the delicate process of converting stolen precious metals into untraceable cash. The black market dealers in Manila asked no questions about the origin of platinum bars, caring only about purity levels and payment terms. Dmitri took a different route, using his navigation expertise to join the crew of a Russian-flagged tanker operating between Eastern Europe and South America. In ports like Odessa, St. Petersburg, and Buenos Aires, connections from his 15-year career helped him quietly liquidate portions of their stolen fortune. His reputation as a trustworthy officer meant dock workers and port officials never questioned his presence. The two men had agreed to move slowly, selling only small quantities at a time to avoid attracting attention. Each transaction was carefully planned, with multiple intermediaries between them and the final buyers. They used encrypted communication apps to coordinate sales across 3 continents, never staying in one location longer than 30 days. Within 4 months, Alex had raised enough money to pay his mother's ransom. The cartel in Medellin accepted the payment through intermediaries, releasing his mother unharmed. Alex immediately relocated her to Vancouver, Canada, where they assumed new identities with help from a forger he'd met during his merchant marine years. His mother knew nothing about how Alex had obtained the money. She believed he'd received an inheritance from a distant relative. Dmitri's success came even faster. The experimental leukemia treatment for his sister Katia cost exactly $847,000, including travel and accommodation expenses in Switzerland. The Swiss clinic accepted payment through a series of wire transfers from accounts in different countries, each transfer small enough to avoid triggering international banking alerts. Katia underwent the treatment successfully, her cancer entering complete remission within 3 months. For the first time in years, both men experienced something they had almost forgotten: hope. Alex watched his mother plant a small garden behind their modest home in Vancouver, her hands steady for the first time since the kidnapping. Dmitri received weekly updates from Katia, whose health improved dramatically with each passing month. The desperate choices they'd made seemed justified by the results. But their triumph contained the seeds of their destruction. In September 2023, 6 months after the heist, the Northern Star arrived in Singapore for a complete refit and inspection. During the extensive overhaul, shipyard workers discovered the sophisticated hidden compartments in cargo hold number 3. The discovery triggered an immediate investigation by maritime security authorities. What happened next revealed the true scope of the criminal organization they had crossed. The missing precious metals weren't just valuable. They belonged to an international syndicate with connections spanning 5 continents. This wasn't a simple smuggling operation. It was part of a massive money laundering network that had been moving billions of dollars in stolen goods for over a decade. The organization's response was swift and terrifying. Within weeks, private investigators were deployed to every major port where the Northern Star had docked in the past year. These weren't ordinary security personnel. They were former intelligence officers, corrupt law enforcement officials, and criminal specialists with resources that dwarfed most government agencies. The hunt began systematically. Every precious metal transaction that had occurred in the 6 months following the theft was analyzed and tracked. Computer algorithms identified unusual patterns in platinum and palladium sales across Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and South America. Bank records were illegally accessed through corrupt officials in dozens of countries. More frighteningly, the organization had detailed personnel files on every crew member who had served aboard the Northern Star during the critical time period. They knew about Dmitri's sister and her medical expenses. They knew about Alex's family situation and the cartel connections in Medellin. What had seemed like anonymous crimes were actually traceable through the very personal motivations that had driven them to steal in the first place. The net was closing, but Dmitri and Alex had no idea. They continued their carefully planned lives, believing they had successfully escaped the consequences of their actions. Alex enrolled in engineering courses at the University of British Columbia, planning to rebuild his career legitimately. Dmitri used a false identity to secure work on cargo ships operating in the North Sea, staying close enough to visit his recovering sister regularly. Both men thought they had won. They had saved their families and escaped without detection. The billion-dollar heist appeared to be the perfect crime they had hoped for. But in the shadows, forces beyond their imagination were closing in with resources and determination that would make their maritime expertise seem like child's play. Just when you think they got away with it, the shadows of their past start closing in. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because what happens next will leave you questioning everything. Success, it turned out, came with a price neither man had anticipated. Dmitri and Alex had saved their families, but they had also destroyed something fundamental within themselves. The moral weight of their actions began crushing them in ways they never expected. Alex found himself unable to sleep through the night. Every sound outside his Vancouver home, a car door slamming, footsteps on the sidewalk, even the neighbor's dog barking, sent his heart racing. He installed security cameras, changed locks weekly, and developed elaborate escape routes from every room in the house. His mother noticed his constant vigilance but attributed it to trauma from their family's experiences in Colombia. Dmitri's paranoia manifested differently. He became obsessed with news reports about maritime crime, searching for any mention of their theft or the Northern Star. He studied every face in every port, convinced that someone was watching him. His sister Katia, now healthy and grateful for her miraculous recovery, couldn't understand why her brother seemed more anxious than ever. The truth they both discovered was devastating. Stealing from criminals doesn't eliminate the moral weight of theft. They had convinced themselves that taking from bad people made their actions justified, but guilt doesn't recognize such distinctions. They had crossed a fundamental line, and no amount of rationalization could bring them back. But their psychological torment was nothing compared to what was actually hunting them. The international criminal organization whose $1 billion they had stolen possessed resources that dwarfed most government agencies. This wasn't just about money, it was about reputation and control. Allowing 2 sailors to steal from them without consequences would signal weakness to competitors and law enforcement agencies worldwide. The manhunt that followed redefined the meaning of sophisticated pursuit. The organization deployed former CIA operatives, retired Mossad agents, and corrupt officials from Interpol. They had unlimited budgets, access to classified databases, and connections in every major port city on Earth. What Dmitri and Alex thought was perfect anonymity was actually a carefully monitored existence. Financial tracking specialists analyzed every precious metal transaction from the past year, using artificial intelligence to identify patterns that human investigators would miss. They traced the flow of platinum and palladium through black market networks, following digital breadcrumbs across continents. Each sale brought them closer to identifying the thieves. Meanwhile, maritime security experts continued debating whether the heist represented perfect planning or extraordinary luck. The technical execution was undeniably brilliant. Dmitri's manipulation of duty rosters, Alex's security system bypasses, their weather pattern predictions, and the sophisticated transfer operation all demonstrated exceptional skill and knowledge. Professor Kenneth Morrison, a maritime security specialist at the Naval War College, argued for the perfect crime theory. These men identified an opportunity that others would have missed, planned meticulously using their professional expertise, and executed flawlessly under extreme pressure. This wasn't luck, it was criminal genius. But Dr. Rebecca Chon, who studies maritime crime patterns for the International Maritime Organization, disagreed. Remove any single element: the storm timing, the fog cover, the security guard schedules, the maintenance system vulnerabilities, and this heist fails completely. They were extraordinarily fortunate that dozens of variables aligned perfectly. The storm that created their opportunity had been unpredictable. Weather services had forecasted clear conditions for that route. The fog bank that provided cover during their transfers lasted exactly long enough for their operation. 12 hours longer and they would have been discovered, 12 hours shorter and they couldn't have completed the theft. Even the security guard who nearly caught Alex had deviated from his normal patrol route only because his supervisor had called in sick that night. The magnetic lock malfunction that triggered the brief alarm could have exposed them if Alex hadn't possessed the specific engineering knowledge to bypass it. Dr. Chan's analysis revealed the uncomfortable truth. Brilliant criminals create opportunities through planning and skill. Lucky criminals stumble into opportunities created by circumstances beyond their control. Dmitri and Alex were both. But the academic debate over their methods became irrelevant as the investigation closed in. By December 2023, the organization had identified both men through their family connections. Dmitri's payments for his sister's treatment and Alex's mother's relocation had created financial patterns that sophisticated tracking algorithms could follow. The hunters had become the hunted, and their expertise in maritime operations meant nothing against opponents who operated by entirely different rules. The story of Dmitri Volkov and Alex Restrepo forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the choices we make when everything seems hopeless. Their billion-dollar heist wasn't just a crime. It was a masterclass in how good people can lose their way when desperation takes control. The first lesson is perhaps the most important. Desperation distorts judgment in ways we never expect. When Dmitri faced his sister's death sentence and Alex confronted his mother's kidnapping, their moral compasses didn't just bend, they shattered completely. They convinced themselves that stealing from criminals was somehow different from ordinary theft. But desperation doesn't recognize moral distinctions. It only sees solutions to immediate problems, regardless of long-term consequences. Think about your own life. Are there situations where pressure or fear is pushing you toward choices that don't align with your values? The danger isn't that you'll suddenly become a criminal. It's that you'll gradually compromise your principles one small decision at a time until you no longer recognize the person you've become. The second lesson reveals something equally troubling. Our greatest skills can become tools for destruction if we lose our moral foundation. Dmitri's 15 years of navigation expertise and Alex's engineering brilliance weren't just useful for their heist, they were essential. Without their professional knowledge, the theft would have been impossible. This teaches us that expertise without ethics is dangerous. The same knowledge that makes us valuable in legitimate careers can make us devastatingly effective when we choose the wrong path. Your professional skills, your network of contacts, your understanding of systems and processes, all of these can be weapons if you decide to use them that way. The third lesson challenges a common rationalization. There's no such thing as a victimless crime. Dmitri and Alex told themselves they were only hurting criminals who deserved it. But their actions created ripple effects that reached far beyond their intended targets. The investigation that followed their theft disrupted legitimate shipping operations, cost innocent workers their jobs, and triggered security crackdowns that made life harder for honest sailors worldwide. Every choice has consequences beyond what we can see or predict. When we convince ourselves that no one gets hurt by our actions, we're usually just choosing not to look hard enough at the real impact of our decisions. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most tragic. Success without honor is hollow. Dmitri saved his sister's life. Alex rescued his mother. By any external measure, they succeeded brilliantly. But their victory came at the cost of their souls. They spent the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders, unable to enjoy the families they had worked so hard to protect. Real success isn't just about achieving your goals, it's about being able to live with how you achieved them. If you can't sleep peacefully at night knowing what you did to get what you wanted, then you haven't really won anything at all. The final lesson is the most inevitable. The past always catches up. Dmitri and Alex thought they were clever enough to disappear forever, smart enough to cover their tracks completely. They had maritime expertise, criminal connections, and a billion-dollar head start. But they discovered that you can't outrun the consequences of your choices, no matter how clever you think you are. The international criminal organization hunting them had resources and determination that made their nautical skills irrelevant. In the end, expertise in one area means nothing when you're facing opponents who operate by entirely different rules. Today, both men live in constant fear, their families safe but their lives destroyed by choices made in moments of desperation. They learned too late that some prices are too high to pay, no matter how noble the cause seems. What's the most important lesson you took from Dmitri and Alex's story? Are there any decisions in your own life where desperation is clouding your judgment? Share your thoughts in the comments. This community supports each other through difficult times. If stories like this help you think differently about the choices in your own life, you need to subscribe to True Crime Case Notes. We don't just tell stories, we help you learn from them. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a case that could change your perspective.